Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex and today we're going to talk about my least favorite books from 2021. Now I know we're almost like halfway through 2022, but I really want to talk about some of my least favorite books from 2021. I don't read like super new books, so these are not like books that were released in 2021. These are just books that I read in 2021. And they're all books that I either rated 3 stars or lower. There are a few that I gave 1 stars to, and that means I absolutely hated it. It pains me to give 1 stars. It pains me to give 1 stars, but there were, I know for sure, 2 books that received 1-star ratings, and I will be talking about them today. So there may be some spoilers, but it's not going to be spoilers to like the plot arc or things like that. It'll just be the reason why I didn't give it a good review. And there is one book in particular that I will talk a little bit longer about because I really just did not like it. So without any further ado, let's get started. So the first book on my list is Of Blood and Bone by Nora Roberts, and this is the second book of the Chronicles of the One series. I talked about this series when I talked about my May maybes because I talked about closing this series out. The reason I didn't love this book, because the first book was so good and this book just really kind of existed. And when you look at trilogies, for me, almost all of the trilogies I read, there's like the first book that's super good, and then the third book that really just like ties up everything and it makes you feel whole and complete, and then the second book always is just kind of there. And this is definitely what happened with this book. It was just there. It served a purpose. There was a lot of important things happening in this book that we needed to get to the third book, but it just wasn't exciting like the first book was. It just kind of fell short for me. There wasn't a lot of action. There was a lot of information dumping, and we're looking at a span of years. Where in the first book, we're looking at a span of like, I don't know, 5 or 6 months. And in this book, we go from, it's almost like a 10-year span of time. So it's quite a lot, honestly. It's a lot to digest, and it just wasn't a lot of excitement. So that's why this one went on the top of my least fave list, is because the pacing just didn't really work for me. I'm still going to finish the series though, so it didn't deter me that much. The next book on my least favorite list from 2021 is The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. I have read Lisa Jewell a few times, and she writes a lot about like familial trauma. In this book in particular, we're looking at basically like a cult living in a house, and then they all just die. And it's all very mysterious and everything. And one girl, who is a baby at the time, happens to get out. And it's her story of figuring out what happened to her family inside this house. Like, it's a big mystery that everyone wants to solve. The reason that I didn't love it, it was so precarious of a storyline for me. Like, we read it for my book club, and we all agreed like, oh yeah, it was really good. And then when we sat down and we started picking apart the book, it was like any one thing that had gone slightly different would have just brought the whole book apart. Like any one thing. It was just a very tediously stacked pile of china dishes. And if you just barely bumped it, the whole thing would have just been whoosh. So I didn't appreciate that. Like, I felt like it was just so slippery. It was just like, literally, if anyone had just tried to approach this family or get into that house or anything like that, instead of just turning a blind eye. And there was just so much trauma in this book. So much trauma in this book. And there's like really weird age gappings in this book too, with like people who are dating and things like that, and I always find that a little precarious. So it was too many delicately stacked things for one book for me. It made it unbelievable and unrealistic. So yeah, I'm pretty sure I gave this one a 3 out of 5 because I did like it. I didn't love it. The next book is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. Okay. I feel like I'm the only person in the world who had never read this book and never seen the film. And let me tell you, I could have gone my whole life without doing either. I didn't like the book. It was just rambling, drug-addled moments. And I couldn't understand what the book was even supposed to be about. Alright, and I got on Goodreads and I started going through the reviews, because when I stumble upon a book that I really don't like, I go through the reviews and I'm like, I need to find out why everybody liked it. That's just who I am as a person. And so I'm on there trying to figure out why everybody liked it, and a lot of people there's my cat, he came to join me. You want to say hello? Say hello. Sorry. A lot of people in the review section said that if you didn't like the book, then you just didn't get it. Well, put me down as I didn't get it. I am okay with being categorized as someone who just didn't understand this book. I just didn't get it. I didn't get the appeal. I didn't get it. Yeah, moving on. The next book on my list is The Siren by Tiffany Reisz. If I didn't say that right, I'm really sorry. I absolutely did not like this book. This is one of the books that I gave 1 star. And the thing that made me the most upset is that people have been recommending this author to me for a long time. And I finally broke down and, read one of her books. I didn't break down and read one of her books. Like, I finally had room in my schedule to put it in. So I put this one in. And let me tell you how utterly disappointed I was in this book, and I absolutely do not understand why the reviews are so high. It is a BDSM book, and it is very heavy on the S, okay? And let me just get into it. We're following a smut writer, and she's trying to get her book published. She's very famous, and she wants to work with this very specific editor. Well, this very specific editor doesn't want to do her book. He doesn't like romance, doesn't like her. But she is persistent that she wants him to do it. Okay, so that's the whole setup of the book. She used to be a sub for like a really important person, and so she lives that lifestyle and she writes the books and all of that. Okay, so just put that in your head. This book was very full of large age gap relationships. And I'm fine with that if it doesn't involve minors. 2 of the instances in this book involve minors. I'm not okay with it. We're talking about like a 30-year-old man grooming a 15-year-old girl. He doesn't sleep with her until she's of age. I think she was like 20 when he finally like had sex with her. But he groomed her from age 15 to be his submissive. I'm not okay with that. So that happened in the book. And then later on in the book, the main character sleeps with like a 15-year-old boy, and she's like in her 30s. And then she made a joke about it, like it was funny. And I just wasn't funny. I didn't find it funny at all. Like, I don't know. And the reviews for this book were so good. I didn't understand. I dug into the reviews because I just did not understand how the reviews were so good for this book. And like, I still don't get it. There were a few 1-star reviews like me, and I read those and they felt the exact same way about the book. Like, apparently people don't care about grooming anymore. Like, that's okay. We can totally groom 15-year-old girls to be submissives when we're 30-year-old men. And we can totally, as 30-year-old women, sleep with 15-year-old boys and not have any opinions about it. As part of a series, I will not be continuing this series. I don't even know if I will read another one of her books because this one was just so off-putting to me. Not even about the S&M stuff, because if I'm okay reading that, not going to yuck anyone's yum, but this was a very intense sadism book. So, but I was really put off by this book. Let's move on. The next is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. Okay. I know what you all are thinking. Like, this book is so popular. Like, so many people have read this book. It's been turned into, the TV series. And everybody loves this book. Everyone talks about it all the time. And I just didn't like it. Okay, first of all, I don't really like vampire books because I think the genre is just really overplayed at this point. Like, everyone's written a vampire book, and I feel like we're not coming out with anything new about vampires. Like, it's all been done. And so when I picked up this book, I actually didn't know that there was going to be vampires in it. I thought it was going to be about witches because it's called A Discovery of Witches. I had no idea that there was going to be vampires in it, and I had no idea that it was going to be a romance. And let me tell you, I am disappointed to find out that it was both a romance and a vampire book, because I was thinking, I don't know, I was definitely not thinking it was going to be like adult Twilight, and that's basically what it is. It's basically adult Twilight. It just, a lot of it didn't make sense, like how quickly she fell in love with him, and she was just so adamant that she wasn't like other women. And it's like, well, yeah, you're a witch, I get it, you're not like other women. But she's like, I don't fall for people like this. Like, pretty sure nobody falls for people like this. So, and I just couldn't get over how much her beau just fawned over her. It was all just really a lot. The sun is like coming in and out of the clouds, so like, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about the lighting. The book, I didn't like A Discovery of Witches. Will I finish this series? Eventually, I will finish this series. A lot of people have told me, oh, the second book is better. Well, the first book should have been better. The first book should have been better, so that I wanted to read the second book. Yeah, I'll eventually read the second book and decide if I want to continue with the series, but it's not going to be anytime soon. That really left a bad taste in my mouth. The next book is Dead as a Doornail by Charlaine Harris, and this is the Sookie Stackhouse series, and this is the series that True Blood was mimicked after. This is the 5th book in the series. I read the 6th book this year, and it has just been a struggle. Every single book has been a struggle, and I finally figured out why I don't like the series. Let's just scratch the whole, you know, it's a vampire novel, because as I just stated, I don't particularly love vampire novels. Let's just put that aside. I do not like this main character. And yes, it took me 6 books to figure out I don't like the main character, but I don't. She's kind of snobby. Every man in this series just falls over himself to get to her. And she's like, oh, I'm nothing special. It's like, yeah, so why is every guy chasing you? Like, I really don't love books like that, because I don't think any person or character is so infallible that every character of the opposite sex is attracted to them. There's got to be some neutral people, right? We can't just have everyone lusting after her. I'm bored with this series. I don't know if I'll continue it or not. I mean, I'm 6 books in. I think there's like 4 more left, maybe. I don't know. Not in love with it. So the next one is 1000 White Women by Jim Fergus. This was the other 1-star book. And honestly, if I could have rated it 0 stars, I would have. The amount of appropriation in this book is astounding to me. It's astounding to me that this book had such good reviews when I thought it was absolute garbage. Oh, I hate saying that. I really do. But okay, so the premise of the book is, I think it's in the 1800s. I can't quite remember when it is. Long ass time ago. In an attempt to bring peace between the indigenous Cherokee people of the U.S. and, you know, the white people of the U.S. The U.S. government decides to give the Cherokee Nation 1,000 white women to, you know, blend the races. It is as bad as it sounds. And yeah, they do turn over the 1,000 white women, and they happen to be 1,000 white women that nobody wants. So they're from insane asylums and things like that. Which, you know, back in that time period that we are, a woman could be sent to an insane asylum for simply not having sex with her husband, or telling her husband no, or getting a job, or any number of things. Women could have been put in insane asylums. It's written in diary form of our main character, and she agrees to go because it will buy her freedom from the insane asylum so that she can go and reconnect with her children that she already has. And the point of the story is that for these white women to become pregnant with Cherokee men's babies and bring up the new generation, the blended generation. This book is just wild. Like, the language, horrifying. The historical value, horrifying. If you want to read books about indigenous peoples, read books written by indigenous authors. Let me just say, main character of this book is a white woman that is in her early 20s. The writer of this book is a white man who was in his 40s when he wrote it. So we have a 40-year-old white man talking about being a 20-year-old white woman and also having a lot of opinions about indigenous peoples. I don't care how much research you could have possibly done, it's not enough. Indigenous stories should not be told by white people. That's my whole opinion. Indigenous stories should not be told by white people. I do not recommend this book. There is a lot of points about it that I did not like, but I don't think I'd ever recommend this book to anybody. But if you look at the reviews, they're glowing. Let's move on. The next book we're going to talk about is How to Walk Away by Katherine Center. And this book was very different. We read it for my book club, and it's about a woman that gets into a plane crash with her fiance. They're in like a little, like private propeller type plane. She wakes up in the hospital with like a bunch of damage, and she has to figure out how to move on with her life. And in the meantime of that, she falls in love. If you like Grey's Anatomy and that whole like dynamic between that love dynamic, not like the medical dynamic, but like, falling in love with your patient thing that tends to happen in that series, then you might like this book. The reason I didn't love it is because there was a lot of like ableism in this book, and the language that they used surrounding her injuries were very, I don't know, it didn't sit well with me. Like, they would keep saying like, when you're fixed, when you're better, when you're yourself again. Like, and this was all coming from her support system, and it's like they weren't even really supporting the fact that she might not ever get better. This may be the new normal for her. And I just think the language that was in the book was very damaging, especially if you're someone who has a similar disability. I think the language in this book was very traumatizing, and I didn't appreciate it. And I am a mostly able-bodied person. I have a lot of chronic pain, and I have a crooked spine. So, yeah, a lot of this, when you're fixed, when they fix you, when they put you back to normal, it's a very degrading type of language. Even as a almost fully able-bodied person, I didn't appreciate it. So I couldn't imagine how ableist this language must feel like to someone who has a more extreme disability. So that's the reason why I didn't rate it very high, is because I thought the language in the book was a little aggressive. The next one on my list is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerri Maniscalco. I probably didn't say that right. I'm terribly sorry. Why I didn't like this book. This book has the I'm not like other girls trope. And I just don't like that. I just don't. Like, she was just so desperate to not be like other girls that it was like, are you even being yourself though? I feel like with this trope of I'm not like other girls means that the main character spends the entire book putting down other girls because they're different than her. Do you know what I mean? She was just constantly putting down other girls that were okay or happy living a lifestyle that was different than hers. Like, she was a feminist, basically. And she was like, all those women that aren't feminist or that aren't wearing pants and, are just willing to stay at home with their husbands and wear dresses and conform to society are less than me. I was like, well, they're not less than you. Maybe they like wearing dresses. Maybe they want to stay at home with their husbands. Maybe they like having afternoon tea. I don't know. She doesn't know either. She's assuming. I had a really hard time enjoying this book, and I thought the plot arc was kind of weak, and the romance was very weak. It was almost non-existent. Like, I feel like they shouldn't have written it in almost. This book could have been really cool, and it just fell a little flat for me. But a lot of people really did like this book, so I didn't really rate it that low. I think I rated it a 3, just because of all of that. But it honestly wasn't a terrible book. Definitely wasn't terrible. The next book on my list is Kill Creek by Scott Thomas. This book was really cool. Like, it was supposed to be a haunted house book, right? And all of these horror writers decide to go stay in this haunted house overnight as kind of like a publicity stunt. Like, they're all going there and they're gonna live stream it, and anyway, they all go, and it just really fell flat for me, because for me, there's like 2 types of ways to write horror. There's like the jump scare kind, where it's like, slasher, killer, like people jumping out of closets and like, that kind of writing. And then there's the slow burn writing that comes from like paranormal type books, like you building the suspense over chapters, and then, finally you get the big scare at the end. Well, since this was a haunted house book, I really was thinking it was going to be more like paranormal writing. And it was a paranormal book, but they wrote it in the jump scare style. It just didn't work for me that way. Now, there were some really great moments all the way at the end of the book, but that was like a really long time to wait to get all of the good stuff. Like, some really gory moments, some really awesome horror writing, but it was so long. It was such a long time coming that I was like, finally, yes, we're here. But if you're one of those people that can put down a book after like 50 or 60 pages because you're just not feeling it, then this book was slow. I really just hung on till the end, and in the end it ended up being worth it. But that's a long time to just hang around. But if you're someone that can DNF books, I wouldn't have finished it, because the first like half to 3/4 of the book was just really like slow, dragging. The plot wasn't moving anywhere. I'm trying to put the pieces together, trying to figure out what's taking so long. Like, yeah, the pacing just wasn't terrific. So yeah, that's why I rated this one a little bit lower. Okay, we're at the last book on my list, and it's The Night Season by Chelsea Cain. And I have talked about Chelsea Cain, and I have talked about this series. It's the Archie Sheridan and Gretchen Lowell serial killer thriller series. I have talked about this on my channel before, and I love this series, except for this book. And I'm not finished with the series yet, but this book just, it fell completely flat for me. Like, I was not excited by the storyline, and Gretchen Lowell was just barely a whisper in the book, and we're seeing just a lot more of Archie and a lot more of the side characters, which is fine. But this is supposed to be a series about Gretchen Lowell and Archie Sheridan, and it wasn't. Was it still a very decent thriller? Yes, very decent thriller. Was it like the other books in the series? No. And I loved the other books in the series, so it wasn't enough. It wasn't so bad that I'm like not going to finish the series. Obviously I'm going to finish the series. I love Chelsea Cain's writing. This one just fell flat for me. Okay, that's it. That's all of my least favorite books from 2021. This one was a little bit longer. If you've read some of these books and you really liked them, please leave me a comment. Tell me why you liked it so much. I want to know why people like these books so much. I'm not going to argue with you. No. I wholeheartedly want to know why you love the book, because I absolutely know there is a reader out there for every single book. And it just so happened that these books were not for me. Are they bad books? No, they just weren't for me. And yeah, that's all of it. They just weren't for me. But maybe they were for you. And if they were for you and they're like some of your favorite books, please tell me about it. I want to know. I want to hear it all. Okay? I promise. I will catch you guys next week and hit all the buttons. I'll see you next time. Bye.